Each military vessel has its own story to tell. However, it is only natural to be more curious when you chance upon an abandoned submarine. You would not be able to believe the stories about these vehicles that we are about to tell you. The creation of these machines is practically a miracle in itself. Soviet Naval Base. Simushir Island is part of an island chain created by volcanic activity and lies around 250 miles away from the coast of Japan. If you take a glance at it, no one would ever think that this deserted island is full of rusted ruins that makes it look a lot like a villain's lair. It was not always like this, as the Soviet Union used its northern part as a secret base for their submarines after they blasted a channel through it and into Brutona Bay during the late 70s. They built a whole town around this base, which was the place of residence of 3,000 people at its peak. There were 3 docks for submarines, and one of these remains intact to this day. The vessels were used to plant explosives and mines in northern Japan. The base also functioned as a radar situation at some point. Nowadays, the only traces of the military location would be the murals, signs, maps, and submarines. German Submarine U-352. The German Submarine U-352 is also known as a Type E-8C U-boat. It began its military career back in 1942 under the Wolfpack as part of the Kriegsmarine in the Battle of the Atlantic. It later made it to North Carolina, where it attempted to down the SS Frieden to no avail. It ran out of luck on the 7th of April, 1942, when it fired at a U.S. Coast Guard cutter after confusing it for a merchant ship. The submarine did not have a chance and ended up sinking to the depths of the ocean after it was fired at. The spot of the submarine wreck is still a popular scuba diving spot thanks to the artificial reef and colorful fish. Hara Submarine Base. For 4 decades, this site was a bustling military hub for the Soviet Union. Since then, the Hara Submarine Base has been abandoned and vandalized. You will find rusted metal structures and an old lighthouse that have been victimized by external forces and darker times. It was built by the Russian military during the 60s and served as a base of operations for the Soviet occupation of Estonia, which lasted until 1991. You would never think that it used to house hundreds of military personnel if you were to look at this place now. The base was made using stones from villages in the area. It got the attention of the world and forced the Soviets to leave after the collapse of the USSR. The USS Ling. The USS Ling was a high-speed submarine that was commissioned in 1945 under the orders of George Garvey Malumphey. It was created to fight German U-boats in the Second World War, although it did not ever fight in any battle. In 1946, it was taken from the Naval Submarine Base New London to the Panama Canal Zone. The following year, it was decommissioned and then given to the Atlantic Reserve Fleet. The USS Ling was repurposed as a training ship and brought to the Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York, where it was then recategorized as an auxiliary submarine. The 2,500-ton submarine can now be found at the New Jersey Naval Museum in Hackensack, New Jersey, although it is not accessible to the public. Despite the interest in restoring it, there was no funding to do this. In 2012, the sub was damaged during Hurricane Sandy. The SFRY Submarine Tunnels. What used to be called Yugoslavia is the site of abandoned and eerie submarine tunnels constructed along the Adriatic Sea. The tunnels in modern-day Croatia made up a strategic military location for the people fighting for the independence of the island of Vis during the German occupation in the Second World War. The tunnels were the first modern military tunnels built into the Vis hillsides. The island was shrouded in mystery for years, since it, particularly the underground tunnel network, used to be the base of the Yugoslavian army when the communism sentiment was still strong. The bunkers were carved deep into the mountains and provided vital military support until they were abandoned during the collapse of Yugoslavia in the 90s. It is still a tourist hotspot that thousands of people visit. The Isle of May disaster. The Battle of May Island has become known as one of the worst military disasters in history. It was so embarrassing that they did not let the public know about it until the passing of everyone involved. You might have heard of it before, but are you aware that there were no enemy vessels involved? All that was there were a battlecruiser ship as well as 3 submarines. On the 13th of January, 1918, These British Royal Navy K-class submarines collided in the middle of the night after they changed direction all of a sudden while making their way to Scapa Flow, Scotland. They changed directions after they noticed they were about to go toward minesweepers but collided with the other ships in the process. It was disastrous as the two submarines sank. All the crew members on the K-4 died, and 51 of 59 members of the K-17 crew got killed. The submarines now lie 100 meters away from each other and 50 meters deep. Sazan Island. Sazan is a small island off the Albanian coast, and once the home of Soviet Whiskey-class submarines, it has since been abandoned, from the obsolete vessels to the networks of tunnels running underneath it. The Soviets operated their biological and chemical weapon plants there, although Albania later seized the base after leaving the Warsaw Pact in 1968. It increased their navy by a significant amount, of course. When the 90s rolled in, the subs were already outdated, so they were neglected and then abandoned together with the base. All you will find there now is a barren base against a wonderful landscape. As a surprise to no one, there are plans to convert it into a tourist destination in the future. U-475 Black Widow or Foxtrot B-39. This massive attack submarine used to be a Soviet Navy vessel back in the Cold War. It was used to train Cuban, Indian, and Libyan submariners. Commissioned in 1967, the vessel was categorized under the Soviet Project 641 class subs, although it was known as Foxtrot to the Western forces. When it got decommissioned in 1994, it went to private individuals and then to a public museum ship in England. 4 years after that, it was put on display in Folkestone. It now lies waiting for restoration along the River Medway in Strood, England. Foxtrot, or Zulu V-Class B-80. Who would have thought that a Navy attack submarine could be repurposed into a party ship or vessel? At any rate, that was the fate of the Soviet Zulu V-Class B-80 sub, which was a vessel under the Soviet Project 611. This meant that it was part of a series of post-war attack vessels. The submarine was renamed Foxtrot and moved to the Maritime Quarter in Amsterdam North. It is currently in the middle of the harbor since submarine enthusiasts want to take it to the Netherlands. It was initially used as a museum ship in Den Helder. The submarine interior was stripped of instruments so that partygoers can do whatever they want inside the craft. Balaklava, Ukraine. The Ukrainian town of Balaklava is so picturesque that you would likely never have guessed that cold, eerie, and long tunnels exist inside the mountain. This was part of the Soviet project to create a secret submarine base with a dry dock and water channel. It used to be called Object 825 GTS and was built in the 50s so the submarines could come up without being spotted. The tunnel network came with a nuclear shelter that would protect the nearby town in case of a nuclear attack. There was also a weapon storage facility there. In 1996, it was abandoned and then repurposed into the Cold War Naval Museum.